joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast. You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And we are back. It's always great to have Rabbi Moshe Bamberger with us. He's the Mashiach Ruchni, the spiritual advisor to Learn to College for Men. He's a prolific writer. He has 11 books under the Great Jewish Series, 19 books total. His latest book is called Great Jewish History. But I also have to say that I loved his father. His father and I used to pray together, Young Israel of Long Beach. Wonderful man and big into history. And he also big into German Jewish culture, even though Moshe has covered beyond the Ashkenazic, as we'll talk about in our program right now. So good to have you back again.
Thank you for having me, Zev.
Again, the latest book is called Great Jewish History, Major Events Until Today, as seen through the eyes of Torah personalities. How long did it take you to write this book? You're covering history from the creation until today, basically speaking.
Yeah, no big deal. It took me about, I would say, a year and a half, with a lot of many hundreds of hours invested in it, not just with the gathering of information, the research, but also hundreds and hundreds of pictures colorized throughout the entire book. It's a coffee table size book with very lavish graphics and beauty. And I wanted to make a book that was really worthy of the title, Great Jewish History. We have a wonderful history of the Jewish people, and there's so much holiness and so much importance to Jewish history. And I wanted the book to really reflect that beauty and that greatness of the Jewish history, the Jewish story.
It's a gorgeous book, and I enjoyed it, looking at it, and it's really fascinating. But let me ask you this question. What makes your Jewish history book different than the other Jewish history books that are out there, including those written by Torah true Jews?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this book
I'm thinking about Rabbi Berel, for example.
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. So Rabbi Berel's books, which are phenomenal classics, his trilogy of Jewish history, those are books that really summarize the major events in Jewish history, and maybe give a little editorializing throughout, but it's more of a place to go for the actual facts and the to run the gamut of Jewish history. That would be a great place to begin. The novel idea in my book is that every page has a description of the event on one side of the spread, plus a headline, and a beautiful picture of the event or a simulation of the event. A quote on the bottom of that page of like either a pasuk, a verse, or a one of the Rishonim's words on that was relevant to that, whether it's a Ramban, a Rambam, or a later rabbinic authority. On the other side of the page, I have 3 or 4 different sort of like sidebars that are coming out of the actual paragraph describing the event. So in the paragraph of the event, there will be like 1, 2, 3 all circled and put throughout, and then the 1 is correspondent to the top one, the 2 is correspondent to the middle one, and the 3 is correspondent to the third one, and each of them has something that one of the great rabbinical personalities of the ages said about that particular event. So the idea of the book is that if you'd want to have a Torah perspective on history, not just an overview of history, but an actual understanding of history through the eyes of Gedolei Yisrael, through the eyes of our great rabbis, who had who were blessed with divine intuition and understanding, you'd be able to get all of that on every episode of Jewish history. And I want to just add that it's not only the events of Jewish history, but it's of world history as well. And for example, we speak about the Titanic, we speak about the lunar landing, the Apollo 11 lunar landing.
You cover everything from top to bottom, or from bottom to
top to
top?
bottom, whenever, well, if assuming that there was rabbis that spoke about it and weighed in on them, we were there. We were covering it. I mean, I'm not saying that we're covering everything in the world. I don't have anything on Vietnam, but if there was something that was important to Jews and there were rabbinical leaders that were weighing in on it, including the last pieces on COVID, so then we covered that fully.
So I want to talk about the Apollo. You write about there's a page in there. So what's a Torah perspective or historical perspective on the landing of the moon? I've spoken to some rabbis that the question was asked not by me, would their theology change if there was life discovered on these planets? And some of them were perplexed by that question, from what I read.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that there are great rabbis that feel that it wouldn't be a problem if there was life on other planets. That would not be contradicting anything of the that we learn about in the Torah. There were many worlds that were built and destroyed before Earth was, and so if human life or any form of life was discovered on the moon or on any other planet, that would not rattle a Torah observant Jew. That wouldn't in any way shake our faith, because it's very possible that there is life forms on other planets. The lunar landing was a very interesting event, because there are early commentators, including the Rambam and others, that felt that the moon is not really a body per se. It's more of a spiritual it's something spiritual. It's something that is not a physical being. The Rambam writes that, and others argue with the Rambam. But when Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was watching the actual lunar landing, and he saw that a man actually landed and stepped on the moon itself, he saw that this was a refutation of the world of philosophy that the Rambam was coming from, and it was more of a nod towards the other, more rational type of beliefs. I bring from Reb Chaim Kanievsky that he brings a proof from somewhere in the Torah that it's possible indeed for a man to land on the moon. The Gemara, the pasuk says at the end of Sefer Devarim, "Lo b'shamayim hi," that the Torah is not found in heaven, and the rabbis say on that if it was found in heaven, we would have to figure out a way to get up there and learn it there. So he says, you see from there that obviously it's possible, theoretically. I mean, thank God it's on planet Earth, the Torah. But if it would be on the moon and we'd have the wherewithal to get to the moon, we would be able to land there and learn it there. So that was a proof that Reb Chaim Kanievsky brought to the fact that there is actually a Torah precedent and source for landing on the moon.
Now, obviously, there's a lot to cover, and you cover history. I was just curious that there is a debate on who sold Yosef. I don't think you get into that into your book. You gloss over it, but that's, I think, an interesting historical question. The conventional wisdom, based on Rashi and other commentators, and the historical perspective, is that the 9 brothers of Joseph sold him. 10 brothers of Joseph sold him. However, Rashi's grandson and others say that it wasn't true. It was the Midianites that pulled him from the pit, and they sold him to the Ishmaelim, and the brothers didn't know that he was sold, and that's why you have confusion as to why they wouldn't recognize their brother when they came to Egypt, and why Reuben was astonished that he couldn't find him in the pit. It explains a lot of things, and that's an interesting historical question, which I know it's hard to cover everything, but I think it's something I find very fascinating.
Interesting. Yes, it is fascinating. We were sticking with more of the mainstream, understanding of history, and the mainstream commentators, or more current or more recent Gedolim, and what they said about different elements of history. We weren't looking for like a scoop or something we were just trying to keep it very straight and narrow and conventional. This is the way we understand. The brothers did sell Yosef, and pulled him out of the pit and sold him. And
you don't actually use language. I think it's ambiguous that he was sold into slavery, but you don't say who. I noticed in the book. I checked. I looked.
Okay. So, maybe I was machavin to you. I had Ruach HaKodesh.
I'm just saying but that's a good
In
historical
100 years
fact.
from now, people are going to be learning up my words like a rishon. They're going to really be like trying to dissect everything. So I'm happy that you're beginning that process.
They're writing a book on it.
Yeah.
But let's look at blood libels. I find that part of that page was fascinating in your book about blood libel, how that all came about, and how it manifests itself throughout history, including after World War II.
Right. Yeah, so the blood libels have been a recurring nightmare for the Jewish people from the medieval times in England and in many other countries. That for some reason it just kept coming up again and again and again, and it wasn't just a little bit of some lashon hara about the Jewish people, but there were actually pogroms that were caused from this. There were whole cities that were destroyed because of some lies that were spread about how Jews, for some reason, need the blood of Christian babies to bake their matzahs, and it's all preposterous. It doesn't. There's no basis for it, but it just kept repeating itself again and again and again throughout history, even until recent times. So there is Ramatisyo Solomon brings from Rebellia Lapian that the reason for the blood libels happening all together. I'm sorry, not Rebbe Chan Wasserman. I'm sorry. He brings from Rebbe Chan Wasserman that the reason why blood libels happened all together, it's such a funny thing, was because the brothers, getting back to your discussion about the brothers and Yosef, they threw Yosef into the pit and they brought back this coat that they dipped in blood, and they told their father Jacob, Yaakov, that Chaya Roach Chalasu, that whoever owned this coat, if it was Yosef, he was consumed, he was torn apart by a wild animal. And because of that hatred that the brothers had towards Yosef, that's why there was blood libels. This is the same idea, the blood that was spilled and by the brothers, to show Yaakov Avinu that Joseph was killed, that has still been yet to be, that slate has still yet to be cleaned, and so the blood libels came about as a result of that. And Ramatisyo Solomon adds one more point, that it always happened historically on Pesach time with the matzahs. It always happened, and he said that the reason for that is because the selling of Yosef by the brothers was really the reason for Yetzias Mitzrayim, for Shibud Mitzrayim. The reason why we went to Egypt and had our slavery there is because the brothers sold. It was like a payback for the fact that the brothers sold Yosef, and so that's why it specifically happens on Pesach time. These blood libels.
And
So
you
it's just an interest.
tied into the red wine too. I saw.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and I brought a picture of my great grandfather's becher, like a big silver goblet with a big bottle of wine, and
I might add, Moshe Feinstein said that the reason why you had the 10 martyrs that were executed for the sale of Joseph later on is because Yosef never said to his brothers, "I forgive you."
It's true. That's right. There's a Rabbeinu Bechaya that says that.
Right.
That's Rabbeinu Bechaya said that person that you have to say you're sorry when you forgive somebody. It's very important to actually not just say it's okay, don't worry about it, we're cool, we're boys. You have to actually say I forgive you, because since Yosef never verbalized those words, we are still living through all of the torment of the generations because of that. And had Rabbi Bechaya says, had Yosef only said clearly, I forgive you, everything would have been much different.
Our guest, Rabbi Moshe Bamberger, and I love the fact that he has 19 books out. The 11th in the series of Great Jewish. Usually some of them are like pocket books. This is a gigantic coffee book. It's called Great Jewish History, Major Events from Creation Till Today, as seen through the eyes of Torah personalities. I know it took you a year and a half to write the book. It's well done. It's well researched. I don't know when you find the time. You're also Mashgiach Rochni at Lander College. But there are certain things that you did not put in. For example, Christianity, which had tremendous impact on Jews since the destruction of the temple.
That is true. I did cover a lot about the destruction of the temple, and I did cover the Tanoim and the Amoraim, and and the period of the of that Christianity was founded, and it wasn't an oversight. I did that on purpose. First of all, like you said before, I couldn't cover every
Well,
topic. I
that's a
also
pretty important topic. It's an
that
impacts Judaism.
is very true. All right, and the next volume we're gonna work on that. Okay,
Is there part two?
the sequel.
Sequel. Bar Kokhba revolt. I'm fascinated by that. Let's focus on that. That's an important piece of Jewish history, where after the destruction of the temple, about 60, 70 years later, they're able to throw the Romans out of Israel, and they rule Israel for 5 years, and they have to send troops from Britain to quell the Bar Kokhba revolt. Amazing.
Yep. Amazing. And Rabbi Akiva thought, he was convinced that Bar Kokhba was actually Mashiach. And it didn't actually turn out that way, and Bar Kokhba was killed. And but it just goes to show that we're all human. We make mistakes, and maybe he actually could have been Mashiach, but for some reason the generation wasn't worthy of it. But Bar Kokhba was a very great general, and he was, I have in the book, I don't know if you saw it, a picture of like a little manuscript that he had written about how he was going to get his Daled Minim, his 4 species before Sukkot, a letter by Bar Kokhba. And what's really fascinating is I put right next to that a picture of a Bar Kokhba coin, that on the coin there's the picture of the lulav and the esrog and the other 2 species. So, we see that he was a man that was really as great as he was militarily, and obviously Rabbi Akiva saw greatness in him spiritually, but he was also concerned about doing mitzvahs properly. In the fog of war, he was still very busy with trying to get himself the Daled Minim.
But you have to listen, the Beis Hamikdash, the temple was destroyed. You had millions of Jews that were killed during that whole bloody escapade of the Romans. And 5 years later, he's able to throw them out and have an army and keep control of the land for 5 years. It's amazing how that can even happen.
It's amazing. It is amazing. It's miraculous. And, the Jews are a people that really exist with miracles. Everything in Jewish history, if there's one takeaway that I'd really like everybody to see from the book, is on every page, besides for the brilliant hashkafa, the Torah viewpoint on things, but you get to see like how God protected us and cared for us and really had great love for us, and because of that he sent miracles. I mean, we're a few days away from Hanukkah. There's no greater time that we celebrate miracles than Hanukkah. Very similar to Bar Kokhba. These were a small group of people that were going and fighting against the mightiest army in the world, the Syrian Greeks. I always tell my students that imagine if there was like a bunch of Hasidim from Williamsburg going up against the United States Army and winning. That's sort of like what happened. I mean, it's not too far-fetched to say there were 5 brothers, right? There are 5 and
Maccabees.
Maccabees, and they were able. These weren't, the coloring books make them out to look like Rambo, but they were probably looking very similar to a rabbi, to a Hasidic rabbi. They weren't working out all day like the Greeks were. What did they have? They had Ruchei Asher Halacha. They had HaKadosh Baruch Hu's spirit, and with that spirit, they were able to have Mesiras Nefesh, and they gave up their life, and lo and behold, they won against all odds.
They won against all odds, and that's really what being a Jew is all about. Is we go against against all odds. In fact, the first Jew, Abraham, he's called Ivri because he went against all odds. He went against the whole world to rescue his nephew Lot.
That's right.
Which is an amazing thing. By the way, the end of Jewish life, people think it happened at the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash of the temple. It really was 70 years later after the Bar Kokhba revolt, when the Romans really threw the Jews out of Israel and changed the name of the country. That was really the end of Jewish life. Most people have that misconception that was the destruction of the temple that did it.
Right, for sure, definitely.
I want to move to contemporary time. One of my favorite rabbis were Ari Levine, the rabbi for the prisoners. He was a Haredi rabbi, but they loved him. The Irgun, the Stern group, he tended to them in prison. He loved them. They loved him. There's such fascinating stories about him. I'd like you to reflect about him. I know you write about him in the book.
Yeah, so Ari Levin, who was also the father-in-law of Rabbi Yashiv, the great Pesach Hadar, Rabbi Ari Levin was a person who was famous as being called the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim. There's a very classic book by Feldheim about him. And the book is replete with stories like you were saying. He used to visit leper hospitals. You know, lepers are people that are highly contagious. Nobody wanted to get near a leper hospital, but Rabbi Ari Levin said there are Jews that are languishing in a hospital, and he went to visit them. He would go to the prisoners, and like you said, they loved him. He didn't care about how, you know, religious they were, how not religious they were. He just saw them as being Jews, and he gave them his undivided love and attention. And there are myriad stories about the greatness of Rabbi Levin. I brought it in my book in the context of the 1967 war, when Jerusalem was redeemed. You know, it was thousands of years since Yerushalayim was Biyadenu, was in our hands, and all of a sudden, you know, miracle of miracles, the 1967 war, also known as the Six-Day War, was where the Jews were able, the Israeli army was able to go and push back against the three mightiest Arab nations. And in 6 days, they were able to completely vanquish them. You talk about miracles. And then, as a cherry on top, the Jordanians stupidly got involved, and because of that, the Israelis pushed them out of Jerusalem. Now, a lot of the problems that we're having today, you know, came about because of that very war. You know, we got, you know, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and, you know, a lot East Jerusalem. All this, a lot of tsaras came out as a result of the conquest also. But the beautiful news was that we were able to get back the old city, along with, of course, the Western Wall, the Kotel HaMaravi.
And we got Hebron
And
too. Hebron also.
Hebron too, right? Hebron too. So Rabbi Levine, when he heard that Jerusalem was recaptured, he ran. He didn't walk. He was already an older man. He ran and ran and ran. And as he was getting closer to the wall for the first time, he kept rolling around on the earth. He just wanted to get, you know, into the actual earth of the old city. And he wanted to, as the Rambam says, that the people in the olden days used to love Yerushalayim. They would roll around in the dirt of Yerushalayim and the dirt of Eretz Yisrael. They loved Kiratzu Baneh Sabaneh. I think the pasuk says that your children loved the stones of Yerushalayim. And Rabbi Levine ran to the Kaisel, and he finally made it there. And he was kissing every stone that he saw, and he was crying, and he was saying Tehillim, and there were people around him. There were famous pictures of him taken at that time, and of course we include that colorized in the book. But he really had a unique love and affection, not just for his fellow Jews and of all stripes, but also for, of course, the holiness of the old city and the Kaisel HaMaravi.
You started in. Now, when you say colorized, was it originally in black and white, and you changed
Yeah.
it to color?
All of these pictures were, you know, I'd say any picture that was taken, you know, before, let's say, 1970 was more often than not black and white. And what I did was I wanted to make the book come alive. I wanted to bring it to life. And of course, the young generation is not used to seeing things in black and white. Even the New York Times became colorized. Everything became colorized. And so I wanted to make it come alive. I wanted to make the pictures pop, the lessons pop. And so I colorized every single picture. It was a painstaking job, but Baruch Hashem, everything came out beautifully, and from the beginning of the book till the end.
Did you use AI to colorize it?
I'm sorry?
Did you use AI to colorize it?
Not AI, but there are other types of apps that I did use, and then some of them were actually I had professionally done by professional artists. It was not done, but you know, like before these apps came about, I used to always colorize the pictures also in the other books. But for that, I used like people that were specializing in colorizing pictures. Now I came across certain AI. It's not. I don't know if it's AI or not. It's just an app. Maybe it works through AI, it could be, but that really worked well.
Right, Moshe Bamberger is our guest. The book is called Great Jewish History, 11th in the series, 19 books. This is the 19th book that he's written. What challenges have you had in writing the book?
The challenges were just basically being able to gather the right material for the right periods, meaning not all periods have as many, you know, sources to bring in, and I was bent on trying to find really not just sources. There's plenty of sources for everything out there, but really to find, a really, powerful lesson.
Did it have to
uh,
be all rabbinic sources, like for example Josephus and the other historians? Did you use them as well?
no, I primarily stuck to rabbinic sources, contemporary rabbinic sources, or Rishonim. But I did not add any. I didn't use academic sources. I didn't use any other sources other than Torah steeped uh, personalities.
By the way, I was looking for Shlomo Kalbach in the book and other great Jewish music personalities that affected Jewish history.
Yeah, I didn't put Mordechai ben David or Avram Frieden either. So I hope Reb Shlomo will be Michael me.
Aren't they part of the historical process, the Baal Tshuva movement you can attribute? In fact, I think Professor Danziger, who's a sociologist, says the Chabad houses were patterned after Shlomo Kalbach's House of Love and Prayer in San Francisco. This certainly had a big impact on the Baal Tshuva movement and the Jewish music world, too. I know you can't get everybody, but he's certainly contemporary. I was just curious to know what criteria you use to who you chose and who you didn't choose.
I guess I used my own intuition. I didn't really. There was no agenda going in to put people in or to keep others out. I just put in the people that I ascribe to and that I am admiring of. I'm a big admirer of Reb Shlomo Carlebach. I'm a big admirer of a lot of people that didn't get in, and a lot of people come to me. How come this person wasn't that? There's no end. I mean, I'm covering 5,000 years of history within 400 pages. You got to cut me a little slack. I can't get everybody's grandfather and
But you know,
uncle.
we're Jewish. We have to ask you that
Yeah,
question. We
I
wouldn't
know.
be Jewish if we didn't ask you that
No,
question,
I
right?
know. You're right. You're right. 100%.
One person that I loved, I know you wrote about Rabbi Yom Tov Lipman Heller. Tell us about him.
Yeah, Yantiv Heller was the Taisus Yantif. He wrote one of the most used, most popular commentaries on the Mishnah. And he was a person that was a great Talmud Chacham, and he suffered so greatly. He was in a community, and the community, which is not, unfortunately, it's not super rare throughout Jewish history, but the community was not happy with certain things that he was doing. He was siding with the poor over the rich, and the rich, powerful people in town didn't like that too much, and they sort of mastered on him. They tattled on him to the government authorities. He was arrested. He was kicked out of his town. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Moses Montefiore was involved, and uh, but he was a person that was a great individual, a great leader who wrote great svarim, but he suffered greatly, and he wrote a Megillah just on the ordeals that he went through. And we have a great historical source from himself about what he went through, all the trials and tribulations that he had to go through. We have a lot of stories like that, unfortunately, throughout history of rabbis that were mistreated by their various communities. Yaakov Yosef in New York,
Chief Rabbi of New
RJJ,
York, he had a
Chief
tough
Rabbi
time.
of New York. He suffered greatly, and many others throughout the Malbim suffered greatly from his communities that he served in. This is not a new thing, unfortunately. It's always been the rabbinate has never been a job for a nice Jewish boy, and
You
and
can tell us
that's
about the Lavush, how he got the name. He was a great commentator.
the Lavush. Oh, that's a big story. There was a woman that was trying to seduce him, and in order to get away from her, he jumped into like a garbage dump, like a real
The chef,
sewer,
right?
and he got all of his 10 garments of clothing all dirtied and sullied in the worst way possible. But in that schus, because he did that in order to just avoid a woman, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed him, and he was able to write 10 masterpieces of Jewish scholarship, and they were each named a different name, all beginning with the word lavush, which means an article of clothing.
Now, you mentioned about the fact that it's a tough job being a rabbi, and a lot of times the congregants didn't appreciate them and the town people didn't. What about rabbi versus rabbi? Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, some others. Talk about that, please.
Yeah, Rabbi Yaakov Emden and Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz had a major conflict that tore the entire Jewish world asunder. Different people were taking different sides. It was all about the kameyas, the amulets that one of the two rabbis wrote, and the other rabbi accused him of being a Sabbathian, somebody that followed Shabsai Tzvi,
The false
and
Messiah.
the false Messiah, and it became a very grave historical conflict. And many people tried to step in to calm things down. The Vilna Gaon tried; it didn't work. The Neidabi Yehuda, Rabbi Yecheskel Landau, sent a famous letter. He called it the Igeres HaShalom, the letter of peace. If you're interested to see it in its almost entirety, you could check out a book that I wrote called Great Jewish Letters, where I include that. And he writes a beautiful letter, and he's very even-handed. He's not trying to side with one side over the other. He's just trying to make peace between them. And so when you're playing peacemaker, you have to give both sides, a lot of kavod and a lot of sympathy and a lot of respect, which he does in the letter. And I think the letter went a far way to be able to bring the machlekes to somewhat of a halt. The interesting footnote of history is that the two Gedalim, who were really, at each other's, necks, if you will, throats, they were buried very near each other. If you go to the cemetery in Altona, Hamburg, there is a rabbinic section, and they were buried, within a stone's throw of one another. It's a whole nother story how that happened, but this was seen as a sign that they were that in Shamayim they had made peace with each
Heaven,
other.
right.
In heaven they made peace, and that was a nice way of ending a very not such a nice period of Jewish history.
But yeah, throughout Jewish history, we had debates. For example, you had rabbis with the printing press siding with one printer over another. The most famous one, Hasidim versus Misnagdim. I know you talk about, but you don't go into much detail or depth into it. That's a very contentious debate, which has some residue even today.
Right, that's true. I wasn't trying to, I was not trying, because today the reality is that Hasidim and Misnagdim, if you will, or the Lithuanian Torah world, they live side by side with Hasidim. They're today. I think the war is over officially. People marry one another and they get along with each other. They learn with one another. They dance with each other. They go to each other's simchas. There's the opposition to Hasidus has really abated, and it's true the Vilna Gaon was very against it, as were many of the Lithuanian Gedalim. But at the end of the day, we want to bury the hatchet a little bit. If things are going well, I don't need to
Well,
dredge up things.
It used to be Litvaks or Lithuanians versus Hasidim. Today, you have within each Hasidic group or even Lithuanian group, you have tension: Satmar versus Satmar, Ger versus Ger, Bubba versus Bubba. You have even Panovich, I think, just resolved one issue where they had an ongoing machlokes. For so many years. So I think it's shifted from being outside the group to within the group.
Yeah, I'll tell you a beautiful story. I don't know if it's true, but most of the beautiful stories are not. But there was two Hasidus. There was two Hasidic groups, and for generations and generations, they were at each other's throats. They were fighting terribly. It was like the Hatfields and the McCoys. They were not interested in making up whatsoever, and they wouldn't marry each other. They wouldn't dance with each other. They wouldn't look at each other. They were so mad at one another. One of the Rebbes died after and then the new Rebbe took over, and his first order of business was he called the other Rebbe and he says, let's make up, let's make shalom. And understandably, a lot of his Hasidim were not happy. You can't do this. We've been doing this for generations. This is like a tradition that it's Minhag Avosenu B'Yadeinu. This is a tradition that we have. We fight with the other Hasidus. That's what we do. Where do you have the gall to go and, step in, and the first thing that you're doing as a Rebbe, before anything else, you make peace? He says, listen, I don't have the Kedusha, the holiness of my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. I don't have the Torah, the scholarship, the brilliance of my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. He says, I don't have the Yirah Shamayim, the fear of heaven that they had. He says, so I should have their machlekas. I should have their fight. I don't have any of the other things that they had. So all of a sudden, the one thing I should keep is their fight. No, I'm going to give that up also.
A beautiful story, a good way to conclude, because we do need peace. And as we do in the Shemona Esrei, we take 3 steps back when we finish, because in order to make peace, you got to sometimes go backwards and bend over to try to accommodate and reach that resolution.
Beautiful.
What's your next book going to be about? Great Jewish
Retirement.
You're not retiring so soon.
It's called Great Jewish Yartzites. It's every day is going to be every page is going to be another day of the calendar year, the Jewish calendar, and we're going to have a beautiful list with pictures of, and short bios of all of the rabbis and the great women as well that were niftar on that day. I want to just add that my book is very special in many ways, but one of the ways that it's unique is that, we live in a society, I'm sure you had many shows on this topic about, newspapers not having pictures of women and magazines not having pictures of women. And understandably, women are not so happy about that, and I don't blame them. But for whatever reason, that's how it is. It wasn't like that when I was growing up as a kid. The Jewish press always had women, and the even the Jewish Observer had women pictures, I think. But in my books, in all of them, I have pictures of men and pictures of women. And women come over to me all the time, and they thank me because they're able to show their daughters what a tzaddikus looks like, what a great Jewish woman, female personality looks like. And that's a very, very important, I feel it's very important to keep Jewish women in the mix, and they are very, so many of the great Yamim Tovim that we have, including Hanukkah and Purim and Pesach, was in the schus of the great women that really came and saved the day. So to just, write them out of history because it's not, I felt that's not the appropriate way to do it. And so in the books, you're going to see, in all my books, you'll find, many, many women that are not only spoken about, but also having their photographs included.
I think it's important. I believe the Lubavitcher Rebbe was given a publication for teens, and he said to the editor, "Where's the girl's picture?" And we didn't put it in. And if you notice, Chabad also makes it a point of always putting women's pictures in their publication, and the Rebbe was behind that. And I think that's a fascinating thing.
Wow.
So thank you for sharing with us. I recommend the book. It's called Great Jewish History. It fits on your coffee table. Major events from creation till today is seen through the eyes of Torah personalities. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Zev. Have a wonderful Hanukkah, and I want to wish all of your wonderful listeners a beautiful Hanukkah. And Mirza Hashem, we should all merit to have the final page of history turn, so that we're able to have Mashiach Tzidkenu, the great Messiah, come and redeem us speedily and in our days.
Amen. I'm looking for part 2 of the history book too. I'm sure there's a lot that you can still put another big book covering the rest of Jewish history. There's so much to write about, but you did a fantastic job with this one. So thank you.
Thank you, Zev. It means so much. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Okay.
Terrific. Great job.